The gavel crashed down like thunder. 10 years, no parole. Judge Clarence Tate's voice echoed through the Atlanta courthouse as Officer Sheila Brantley's lips curled into a victorious smirk. Marcus Holloway stood motionless, his dark eyes betraying nothing as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. But beneath his calm exterior lay a secret that would soon shatter everything. This conviction was exactly what he'd been waiting for. If you're watching from your city, drop a comment below and let me know how far this story has traveled. Now let's dive into how a racist cop's greatest triumph became her ultimate downfall. The fluorescent lights in Courtroom 7B cast harsh shadows across the polished wooden benches, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a theater stage than a hall of justice. Marcus Holloway sat at the defendant's table, his posture perfect, despite the weight of accusation pressing down on his shoulders. His tailored navy suit, immaculate even after 3 days of trial, stood in stark contrast to the orange jumpsuits typically seen in this chair. Every detail about him suggested precision control and something else that Officer Sheila Brantley couldn't quite place but instinctively despised. "Your Honor," Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Morrison's voice cut through the tense silence. "The prosecution rests its case. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Holloway assaulted Officer Brantley during a routine traffic stop, resisted arrest, and endangered public safety." Marcus's lawyer, Tanya Brooks, a fierce black woman with 20 years of fighting systemic injustice under her belt, gripped her pen so tightly her knuckles went pale. She'd seen this play before the script, where black men were guilty until proven innocent, and sometimes not even then. But something about Marcus's unwavering calm kept her fighting when logic said they'd already lost. "That's a lie, and everyone in this courtroom knows it," Tanya said, rising to her feet. "My client was profiled, harassed, and falsely accused by an officer with a documented history of complaints that mysteriously disappear from her record." Sheila Brantley shifted in her seat on the witness stand, her blonde ponytail swaying as she turned to face Tanya with barely concealed contempt. At 34, Sheila had built her career on a foundation of fear and prejudice, climbing the ranks of the Atlanta Police Department, not through merit, but through her willingness to be the enforcer of unwritten rules. Her pale blue eyes, which her academy instructor had once called cop's eyes, always watching, always suspicious, now blazed with righteous indignation. "Objection!" Morrison shot up. "Counsel is making inflammatory statements without evidence." "Sustained," Judge Tate replied wearily. He was 3 months from retirement, and cases like this, cases that reeked of something rotten, but came wrapped in proper legal procedure, made him count the days. Tanya's jaw clenched, but she continued. "Officer Brantley, you testified that my client became violent during the traffic stop. Can you explain why your body camera mysteriously malfunctioned during those crucial moments?" Sheila's expression didn't waver. She'd rehearsed this moment dozens of times with Deputy Chief Victor Rollins, her mentor and protector within the department. "Equipment failures happen, counselor. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't change what happened. Mr. Holloway attacked me when I asked for his license and registration. I have the bruises to prove it." "Bruises that appeared in photos taken 3 hours after the arrest," Tanya countered, "but were mysteriously absent from the booking room security footage." The gallery stirred. Among the observers sat Mrs. Patricia Holloway, Marcus's mother, her hands clasped in prayer. She'd raised her son alone after his father died in Afghanistan, taught him to stand tall, but never threatening to speak clearly, but never aggressively, to be twice as good to get half as far. Now she watched her boy, her successful college-educated boy, who'd never had so much as a speeding ticket, being railroaded by a system that saw his skin before his character. "Marcus, baby," she'd whispered that morning before court. "God sees everything. Truth always wins in the end." Marcus had hugged her, feeling the tremor in her thin frame. I know, Mama. Trust me, I know exactly what I'm doing. She'd pulled back, searching his face with eyes that had seen too much pain. What do you mean? Just trust me, he'd repeated, kissing her forehead. Now, as Sheila continued her testimony, weaving a narrative of danger and violence, Marcus's mind drifted to 3 months earlier, the night that had started this entire charade. It had been raining, one of those sudden Atlanta downpours that turned streets into rivers. Marcus had been driving his BMW through Buckhead, returning from a meeting that had run late. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. Package delivered. Proceed with phase 2. That's when the blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Officer Sheila Brantley had been hunting. That's what she called it when talking to Victor and her select circle of like-minded officers. Hunting for the criminals who didn't belong in Buckhead's affluent streets. The BMW was too nice, the driver too dark, the combination too suspicious for her trained eye. License and registration, she'd said, rain streaming off her hat as Marcus rolled down his window. Of course, officer. Is there a problem? Marcus had kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, following the rules every black parent taught their children. I'll ask the questions. You been drinking tonight? No, ma'am. I don't drink. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why I haven't committed any traffic violations? That's when Sheila's hand had moved to her gun. I said step out of the vehicle, now. The dashcam footage, the one Sheila claimed was corrupted, had captured everything. Marcus stepping out slowly, hands visible. Sheila pushing him against the car, her voice growing aggressive. Where'd you steal this car? It's my car. My registration is in my hand. Shut up. You're resisting. I'm not moving, officer. I'm completely still. Stop resisting. The footage showed Sheila throwing Marcus to the wet pavement, her knee in his back as he lay motionless. It showed her pulling his wallet, seeing his Department of Defense contractor ID, the fake one that had taken months to perfect. It showed her pause, then toss it aside. Probably fake, she'd muttered loud enough for her body mic to catch before she remembered to turn it off. Back in the courtroom, Tanya was building to her crescendo. Officer Brantley, you've been with the Atlanta PD for 12 years. In that time, how many of your arrests have involved black men? Objection, relevance, Morrison called out. Goes to pattern of behavior, Your Honor, Tanya responded. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor, Judge Tate warned. Sheila's face reddened slightly. I don't keep track of statistics like that. I arrest criminals regardless of race. According to department records, which we subpoenaed, 87% of your arrests over the past 5 years have been black men. In a district that's only 30% black. How do you explain that? I go where the crime is, Sheila said flatly. Maybe if certain communities took responsibility. Objection, Tanya said sharply. Sustained. The witness will refrain from editorializing, Judge Tate said. But the damage was done. Several jury members, particularly the older white ones Victor had helped ensure were selected, nodded slightly. They'd heard what they needed to hear. Sheila was just a good cop doing a tough job in dangerous neighborhoods. During the lunch recess, Marcus sat with Tanya in a small conference room, pushing salad around his plate without eating. We're losing, Tanya said bluntly. That jury's buying her story. Without the real dashcam footage, it's her word against yours, and in this system. I know, Marcus said quietly. You've done everything you could, Tanya. There has to be something else. Some evidence we're missing. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Tanya Brooks was a good woman, a true believer in justice. She deserved to know the truth, but not yet. Not until all the players had shown their cards. Sometimes, he said carefully, losing a battle is the only way to win the war. She frowned. Marcus, what aren't you telling me? Just keep fighting. Do exactly what you've been doing. The truth has a way of surfacing when people think they've already won. Meanwhile, in a pristine office at One Police Plaza, Deputy Chief Victor Rollins was having a very different lunch meeting. At 53, Victor was everything wrong with law enforcement, wrapped in a package of commendations and political connections. His silver hair and broad shoulders gave him a commanding presence that had served him well in climbing the ranks, while his ability to make problems disappear had earned him powerful friends. "She's doing well," said Captain James Durham, one of Victor's longtime allies. "Jury's eating it up." "Sheila's a natural," Victor agreed, pouring himself another scotch, despite it being barely noon. "She understands what we're really protecting here." "The thin blue line," Durham nodded. "More than that. Order, structure, the way things are supposed to be. You let one of them drive a car like that through Buckhead without consequences, next thing you know, the whole neighborhood goes to shit." Durham shifted uncomfortably. Even for him, Victor's words danced dangerously close to a line they weren't supposed to cross out loud anymore. "What about the lawyer? Brooks is smart. She might find something." Victor smiled coldly. "Let her dig. Every piece of evidence she might find has already been handled. The dashcam footage corrupted beyond recovery, tragic technical malfunction. Witness statements. The only witnesses who matter are the two officers who arrived as backup. Mitchell and Torres. Good men. Smart men. They know which way the wind blows." Victor stood walking to his window that overlooked downtown Atlanta. "This city is changing, James. Demographics, shifting politics, getting soft. But the police were the last line of defense, and sometimes defending civilization means getting your hands dirty." Back in court, the afternoon session brought Officer David Mitchell to the stand. Young, nervous, with the kind of fresh-faced earnestness that juries loved, Mitchell had been on the force for only 2 years. He'd arrived at the scene just as Sheila was putting Marcus in handcuffs. "Tell us what you saw, Officer Mitchell," Morrison prompted. "I responded to Officer Brantley's call for backup. When I arrived, I observed the suspect, Mr. Holloway, on the ground, with Officer Brantley maintaining control. He was verbally aggressive, making threats." "What kind of threats?" Morrison asked. He said he'd make sure she lost her badge, that he had connections, that she'd picked the wrong person to mess with." In the gallery, Marcus's mother gasped softly. That didn't sound like her son at all. But then again, nothing about this sounded like her Marcus. Tanya stood for cross-examination. "Officer Mitchell, these threats you claim my client made, they're not on any recording, are they?" "No, ma'am. The body cameras were experiencing issues." "How convenient." "Tell me, Officer Mitchell, how long have you been partners with Officer Brantley?" "We're not partners. I just happened to be in the area." "But you've responded to her calls before." "A few times. 17 times in the past year, according to dispatch records. That seems like more than coincidence." Mitchell's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "It's a small district." "Officer Mitchell, are you aware of the conversation you had with Officer Torres in the station break room 3 days after the arrest? The one where you said, and I quote from the security footage, 'I don't know, man. Brantley's story doesn't add up, but Rollins says we need to stick together.'" The courtroom erupted. Morrison jumped up, objecting loudly, while Judge Tate banged his gavel for order. Mitchell's face had gone pale, his eyes darting to where Victor Rollins sat in the gallery, his expression thunderous. I don't recall that conversation," Mitchell stammered. "Your Honor," Tanya said, "I'd like to submit the break room security footage as Defense Exhibit D." "Objection!" Morrison was practically shouting now. "This footage hasn't been properly authenticated. We haven't had time to review." "Your Honor," Tanya interrupted, This footage was obtained through proper legal channels from the Atlanta PD's own security system. If the prosecution needs time to review their own department's recordings, Judge Tate rubbed his temples. The case that had seemed straightforward was becoming a mess. We'll recess until tomorrow morning. Counsel, I want briefs on my desk by 8 a.m. regarding the admissibility of this evidence. As the courtroom cleared, Sheila cornered Mitchell in the hallway. What the hell were you thinking running your mouth like that? I didn't think there were cameras in the break room, Mitchell said miserably. Sheila, I'm not comfortable with this. The guy didn't do anything. He did exactly what I said he did, Sheila hissed, grabbing his arm. You saw what you saw because that's what happened. Got it? Or do you want to explain to your pregnant wife why you suddenly lost your job and pension? Mitchell yanked his arm away. Don't threaten me, Sheila. I'm not threatening. I'm reminding you how the world works. We protect each other, or we all go down together. That evening, Marcus received a visitor at his apartment, one of the conditions of his bail that Tanya had fought tooth and nail to secure. The man who entered didn't knock. He had a key. How's it going? FBI Special Agent in Charge Ronald Chen asked, settling into Marcus's living room like he owned the place. Which technically the Bureau did. The entire apartment was a safe house. About as expected, Marcus replied, finally allowing exhaustion to show in his features. Brantley's playing her part perfectly. Arrogant, convinced she's untouchable. And Rollins. He's the real prize, Ron. Brantley's just a symptom. Rollins has a network, judges, prosecutors, city officials. He's been running this game for 20 years. Chen nodded, opening the encrypted laptop he'd brought. The Attorney General is watching this personally. Civil Rights Division is ready to move the moment you give the signal. Not yet. We need them all to show their cards. The falsified evidence, the witness tampering, the conspiracy, it all needs to be documented in open court. You know you're taking a hell of a risk. If this goes south, if the jury actually convicts, Marcus smiled grimly. Then Special Agent Marcus Holloway, 3-year veteran of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, goes to prison for a crime he didn't commit. But we both know it won't come to that. You have more faith in the system than I do. No, Marcus corrected. I have faith in arrogance. Brantley and Rollins think they've already won. That's when people make mistakes. Chen studied the younger agent. Marcus had volunteered for this assignment knowing the dangers. As one of the few black agents with the right background and skills for deep cover work, he'd argued he was the only choice. But Chen knew it was more than that. Marcus had his own history with corrupt cops, a cousin beaten so badly during a routine stop in Detroit that he'd never walked again, an uncle framed for drugs in Chicago, who'd spent 5 years in prison before video evidence mysteriously surfaced, proving his innocence. This was personal for Marcus, but he'd never let it compromise the mission. Your mother doesn't know, Chen asked. No, and she can't. Her genuine fear, her real tears, the jury needs to see that. Brantley needs to believe she's destroying not just me, but my whole family. That's cold, Marcus. That's necessary. You've seen the files, Ron. 17 black men in the past 5 years, all arrested by Brantley or her circle, all convicted on questionable evidence. 3 of them died in prison. How many more if we don't stop this now? Chen couldn't argue with that. The investigation had started 18 months ago, when a pattern emerged: too many arrests in affluent areas, too many convictions despite weak evidence, too many complaints that disappeared. The Department of Justice had tried conventional investigations, but the blue wall held firm. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could draw out the corruption and document it in a way that couldn't be denied or covered up. Marcus had proposed a radical solution: let them frame him. Let them commit their crimes in open court on the record, where every lie would be documented, every conspiracy exposed. The break room footage was a nice touch, Chen said. Mitchell didn't expect that. He's the weak link, young enough to still have a conscience not so deep that he can't get out. He'll turn when the time is right. You hope. I know. I've been watching him for 3 months. He goes home and can't look his wife in the eye. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's more afraid of Rollins than his conscience. We just need to change that equation. The next morning brought chaos to the courthouse. Overnight, someone had leaked portions of the dashcam footage to a local civil rights group. Not the whole video, just enough to show Sheila throwing Marcus to the ground while he stood completely still. The footage was grainy edited, but it was enough to spark outrage. By 7 a.m., protesters had gathered outside the courthouse. Justice for Marcus signs waved in the morning sun, while chants of "racist cops have got to go" echoed off the building's marble facade. Inside Judge Tate's chambers, the atmosphere was tense. "Your Honor," Morrison argued, "this leak is clearly an attempt to taint the jury pool. I move for a mistrial." "A mistrial?" Tanya shot back. "My client is the victim here. If anything, this footage proves what we've been saying all along." "This footage has been edited and manipulated," Morrison interrupted. "We don't even know if it's authentic." "Then produce the original," Tanya challenged. "Show us the full, unedited dashcam footage that proves Officer Brantley's version of events." Morrison's jaw tightened. "As we've explained, that footage was corrupted. How convenient that every piece of evidence that might exonerate my client mysteriously disappears or gets corrupted." Judge Tate raised his hand for silence. "Enough. I'm not granting a mistrial. The jury will be instructed to disregard any media coverage. However, Ms. Brooks, if I find out your team was behind this leak..." "We weren't, Your Honor. We're as surprised as anyone." That was true. Tanya had no idea where the footage had come from. When she'd asked Marcus about it, he'd simply shrugged and said, "Atlanta's full of activists with computer skills." In reality, FBI technical specialist Sarah Kim had worked through the night to extract and enhance frames from the corrupted file, creating just enough clarity to spark public interest without revealing the Bureau's involvement. It was a delicate balance, too much revelation, and Rollins might smell a trap. Too little, and the public pressure wouldn't build. Back in court, with the jury supposedly unaware of the morning's drama, Sheila retook the stand for redirect examination. Morrison worked to rebuild her credibility, painting her as a dedicated officer under siege by anti-police activists. "Officer Brantley, how has this case affected you personally?" Morrison asked with practiced sympathy. Sheila's expression softened a performance she'd rehearsed. "It's been devastating. I've served this city for 12 years. I've put my life on the line every day to protect people, and now I'm being vilified for doing my job. My daughter came home from school crying because kids were calling her mother a racist. I've received death threats, all because I stopped a man who attacked me." Several jury members looked sympathetic. The middle-aged white woman in the front row, a small business owner from Decatur, dabbed at her eyes. "And yet you're still here, still testifying." "Why?" Morrison prompted. "Because the truth matters. Because if we let criminals walk free just because they make false accusations against police, then society crumbles. I'm here for every good cop who's ever been falsely accused, for every citizen who depends on us for protection." It was masterful, Marcus had to admit. Sheila had transformed herself from aggressor to victim, from oppressor to hero. The narrative was flipping, just as Rollins had orchestrated. During the lunch break, chaos erupted outside. What had started as a peaceful protest suddenly turned violent when a group of masked individuals began throwing bottles at police lines. The response was swift and brutal: tear gas, rubber bullets, arrests. Within minutes, the narrative on the news changed from protesters demand justice to violence erupts at courthouse. Watching from a window, Victor Rollins smiled. The masked agitators had cost him $5,000, but it was money well spent. By evening, public opinion would shift. Marcus Holloway would go from victim to instigator, from sympathetic figure to dangerous radical. "You see that?" he told Sheila as they watched the chaos below. "That's how you control a narrative. Give them violence and they'll forget all about justice." But Rollins had made a crucial error. Among the legitimate protesters was FBI agent Diana Park undercover and recording everything. She captured clear footage of the masked agitators arriving in a van registered to a private security company with ties to Rollins. She documented them changing into their masks, receiving instructions from a man she recognized as one of Rollins's off-duty officers. She recorded it all, building the conspiracy case piece by piece. Inside the courthouse, Marcus watched the violence with a heavy heart. He'd known Rollins would escalate, but seeing innocent protesters beaten for a false flag operation still enraged him. Every injury, every arrest, it was all part of Rollins's game. But it was also evidence. Cold, hard evidence that would eventually bury him. The afternoon session brought a surprise witness, Reverend William Clark, a respected community leader who'd supposedly witnessed the traffic stop. "Reverend Clark," Morrison began, "can you tell us what you saw that night?" The elderly black minister adjusted his glasses, his voice grave. "I was driving home from visiting a parishioner when I saw the police lights. I pulled over concerned. What I saw was Officer Brantley trying to do her job, while Mr. Holloway became increasingly aggressive." The gallery stirred. Why would a black minister support Sheila's version? He was shouting, making threats. Officer Brantley showed remarkable restraint, in my opinion. If anything, she was too patient. Tanya was stunned. She hadn't known about this witness, which was a violation of discovery rules. But more importantly, she knew Reverend Clark. He'd been a civil rights advocate for 40 years. This testimony made no sense. "Your Honor, I request a recess to review this witness's statement," Tanya said. "We received no prior notice. Reverend Clark came forward just this morning, Your Honor," Morrison explained smoothly. Given the urgency and relevance of his testimony, Judge Tate looked tired. "I'll allow it, but Ms. Brooks will have full opportunity for cross-examination." During cross, Tanya probed carefully. "Reverend Clark, you said you were returning from visiting a parishioner. Which parishioner?" I don't recall specifically. I visit many people." "According to your church calendar, you had no visits scheduled that evening." "It was an emergency visit. Sometimes the soul can't wait for appointments." "Reverend, are you aware that your church received a donation of $50,000 from the Police Benevolent Association just last week?" The Reverend's composure cracked slightly. "That donation has nothing to do with my testimony." "Reverend Clark," Tanya pressed her voice gentle but firm, "you're a man of God. Does it not trouble your conscience to bear false witness?" "Objection," Morrison called out. But the damage was done. Reverend Clark's hands trembled as he gripped the witness stand. "I saw what I saw," he said weakly, but his eyes told a different story. Story of a man whose community center desperately needed funds, who'd been promised help in exchange for testimony, who'd sold his integrity for 30 pieces of silver adjusted for inflation. That evening, Marcus met with Agent Chen in a parking garage, their conversation covered by the sound of traffic from the highway above. "Clark was unexpected," Chen said. "Rollins is pulling out all the stops. He's desperate. The leaked footage spooked him. He's accelerating his timeline, which means he's making mistakes." "Like what?" The payment to Clark's church, too obvious, too traceable. The riot today, Park got everything on video, and Mitchell's getting ready to crack. I saw him in the bathroom after Clark's testimony. He was literally sick to his stomach. You think he'll flip? Give him the right push. Maybe have someone approach him not as FBI, but as internal affairs. Let him think he can save himself by cooperating with a departmental investigation. Chen nodded. I'll make the call. What about your mother? This is killing her, Marcus. Marcus's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing the pain beneath. I know. After this is over, I'll explain everything. She'll understand. I hope. And if she doesn't, then I'll have sacrificed my relationship with the one person who matters most to me for the sake of justice. But how many mothers have lost their sons to cops like Brantley? How many more will if we don't stop this? The next day brought another surprise. Officer Torres took the stand, and his testimony diverged slightly, but significantly from Mitchell's. Where Mitchell had said Marcus made threats immediately, Torres claimed they came later during transport. Where Mitchell said Marcus was on the ground when they arrived, Torres said he was still standing, aggressive. Tanya pounced on the inconsistencies. Officer Torres, you and Officer Mitchell have had 3 days to coordinate your stories, and you still can't keep them straight. We're telling the truth as we remember it, Torres said defensively. High-stress situations affect memory. Or maybe the truth is that you're both lying, and lies are harder to keep straight than facts. Objection, Morrison called out, but Judge Tate overruled her. The inconsistencies were too glaring to ignore. During the lunch break, Mitchell approached Tanya in the hallway. Can we talk? He asked quietly, glancing around nervously. Not without your union representative present, Tanya said carefully. She sensed the breakthrough coming, but couldn't risk it being thrown out on procedural grounds. I don't want them involved. It's eating me alive. What we're doing to your client, it's wrong. Then testify to that. You don't understand. Rollins owns half the department. If I turn, I'm dead. Maybe literally. Tanya studied the young officer. What if I could guarantee your safety, federal protection? Mitchell's eyes widened. Federal, what are you talking about? Meet me tonight. Piedmont Park, the bridge over the pond. 8 o'clock. Come alone. Mitchell nodded and hurried away, not noticing the figure watching from the shadows. Victor Rollins had eyes everywhere, and Officer Mitchell had just signed his death warrant, or so Rollins believed. That afternoon, the prosecution rested its case. The evidence, despite its inconsistencies, painted a damning picture. Sheila's testimony, backed by 2 fellow officers and a respected minister, carried weight. The edited dashcam footage had been dismissed as inadmissible. The forensic evidence, Marcus's fingerprints on Sheila's uniform, where he'd allegedly grabbed her, seemed conclusive. Tanya began the defense's case by calling character witnesses Marcus's employer, or rather the FBI front company, that employed his cover identity, his neighbors, his college professor. All painted a picture of a quiet, law-abiding man who'd never shown any tendency toward violence. But character witnesses only went so far. Without hard evidence to contradict the prosecution's narrative, Marcus was facing conviction. That evening, as Mitchell made his way to Piedmont Park, he noticed he was being followed. A black sedan stayed 3 cars behind him, professional but not quite professional enough. Mitchell had been a cop long enough to recognize a tail. Instead of panicking, he called Torres. I'm being followed. Where are you going? Torres asked. Just driving. Needed to clear my head. Don't do anything stupid, Mitchell. We're in this together, remember. Mitchell hung up and changed course, heading to a sports bar instead. He spent 2 hours nursing beers and watching the game, then went home. The meeting with Tanya would have to wait. But Tanya never showed up at the park anyway. She'd received an anonymous call warning her it was a trap. The caller, actually Agent Park, suggested a different approach. The next morning, day 5 of the trial, Tanya announced she had a new witness. The defense calls Jessica Martinez. A young Latina woman took the stand, visibly nervous. She worked at a convenience store near where the traffic stop had occurred. "Ms. Martinez, were you working the night of March 15th? Tanya asked. "Yes." "Did you see the traffic stop involving Officer Brantley and Mr. Holloway?" "Yes. Our security camera faces the street." "I saw everything." Morrison jumped up. "Your Honor, this witness wasn't on the defense list." "She came forward yesterday evening," Tanya explained. "She was afraid to testify given the current climate around police testimony, but her conscience compelled her." Judge Tate allowed it, and Martinez continued. "The officer, she was aggressive from the start. The man, Mr. Holloway, he was calm, respectful. She threw him down for no reason. Then she turned off her body camera and started hitting him." "That's a lie," Sheila burst out from the gallery. "Officer Brantley, you will remain silent or be removed from the courtroom," Judge Tate warned. "Ms. Martinez," Tanya continued, "why didn't you come forward sooner?" "I was scared. My brother, he was deported last year. I thought if I testified against a police officer, they'd come for me too. But then I saw the protests, saw Mr. Holloway's mother crying on the news. I couldn't stay silent." Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. She questioned Martinez's immigration status, her criminal record, a shoplifting charge from when she was 18, her ability to see clearly from inside the store. But Martinez held firm. "I know what I saw. That officer attacked an innocent man." During the afternoon break, Rollins met with Morrison in a courthouse conference room. "This is getting out of hand," Morrison said. "First the footage, now this witness. If there's something you're not telling me..." "There's nothing," Rollins said firmly. "The witness is lying, probably paid off by activists." "Victor, I'm risking my career here. If this goes south..." "It won't. I have one more card to play. Trust me." That card was revealed the next morning. Morrison announced she had rebuttal evidence, a video from a traffic camera that supposedly showed Marcus reaching for something in his car before Sheila approached something that looked like a weapon. The video was grainy, the angle poor, but there was definitely movement that could be interpreted as threatening. Tanya was stunned. She'd reviewed all traffic camera footage from that night. This angle hadn't existed in the files she'd received. "Your Honor, this is clearly fabricated evidence," she argued. "This footage mysteriously appears now after their case is falling apart." "It was just discovered," Morrison claimed. "The city's traffic system archives footage in multiple locations. This was in a backup server that wasn't initially searched." Judge Tate looked skeptical but allowed it. The damage was done. The jury had seen what looked like Marcus reaching for something. In the climate of police shootings and split-second decisions, it was enough to create reasonable doubt about Marcus's innocence. That night, Marcus met with Chen one last time before closing arguments. "The fake video was a mistake," Chen said. "Our tech team analyzed it. It's definitely doctored. We can prove it was created using footage from 3 different nights spliced together." "But not in time for closing arguments," Marcus said. "We could reveal everything now. Blow your cover, arrest them all." Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. Let them think they've won. Rollins still hasn't shown his whole network. We need the conviction." "Marcus, that's insane. You could go to prison. For a few days at most. Once the verdict comes down, Rollins will get sloppy. He'll celebrate contact, his network move money. That's when we strike." Chen studied his agent. "You're gambling everything on your read of his psychology." "It's not a gamble. I've spent 3 months studying him. Victor Rollins is a narcissist who's never faced real consequences. When he wins this case, he'll see it as proof of his invincibility. That's when he'll make the mistake we need. Closing arguments were delivered the next morning. Morrison painted Marcus as a dangerous man who'd attacked a police officer and was now trying to destroy her reputation to avoid consequences. She emphasized the video evidence, the testimony of fellow officers, the respected reverend who'd witnessed the event. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Morrison concluded, "we depend on police officers like Sheila Brantley to keep us safe. If we allow criminals to assault them without consequence, if we let false accusations destroy their careers, then we invite chaos. You must find Marcus Holloway guilty." Tanya's closing was passionate, focusing on the inconsistencies, the mysteriously appearing evidence, the climate of fear that prevented witnesses like Martinez from coming forward sooner. "This case isn't just about Marcus Holloway," she said, looking each juror in the eye. "It's about whether we live in a society where those with badges can destroy lives with impunity. It's about whether the color of your skin determines your guilt before you ever see a courtroom. I beg you, don't let this injustice stand. Find Marcus Holloway not guilty." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Marcus stood, his face calm, despite his mother's soft sobbing behind him. "On the charge of assault on a police officer," the foreman read, "we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of resisting arrest, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of making terroristic threats, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Protesters shouted. Patricia Holloway collapsed into the arms of her sister. Sheila Brantley smiled a cold expression of triumph. Victor Rollins nodded with satisfaction. Judge Tate banged his gavel for order. "Mr. Holloway, you've been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be—" He was interrupted by a court officer approaching the bench with a sealed envelope. Judge Tate frowned, opening it. His face went pale as he read the contents. "Counsel in my chambers, now!" The attorneys followed the judge, leaving a confused courtroom behind. Inside chambers, Judge Tate held up the document with shaking hands. "This is a federal warrant for the arrest of Officer Sheila Brantley, Deputy Chief Victor Rollins, and 6 other members of the Atlanta Police Department." Morrison's mouth fell open. On what charges?" The door opened and Agent Chen entered, flanked by a dozen FBI agents. "Conspiracy to violate civil rights, fabrication of evidence, perjury, witness tampering, and about 30 other charges," Chen said. "Judge Tate, we need to return to the courtroom. Agent Holloway has something to say." "Agent Holloway," Tanya gasped. Back in the courtroom, Marcus stood as Judge Tate retook his seat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed of extraordinary circumstances. Mr. Holloway, please approach." Marcus walked forward, his entire demeanor changing. The subdued defendant was gone, replaced by a federal agent with steel in his spine. "Your Honor, my name is Special Agent Marcus Holloway, FBI Public Corruption Unit. For the past 3 months, I've been working undercovers to expose a conspiracy within the Atlanta Police Department to violate the civil rights of minority citizens through false arrests, fabricated evidence, and perjury." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Sheila Brantley's face went from triumph to horror. Victor Rollins stood to run, but found FBI agents blocking every exit. "The traffic stop was staged," Marcus continued, his voice carrying over the noise. "We knew Officer Brantley would target me based on her established pattern of behavior. Every moment of our encounter was recorded by multiple FBI surveillance devices. The real dashcam footage which Officer Brantley destroyed has been recovered from her home computer, where she thought she'd deleted it. The fabricated traffic camera video was created by Deputy Chief Rollins. Using department resources, we have the digital forensics to prove it." Judge Tate, still reeling, managed to speak. "The verdict will be vacated, Your Honor," Chen interjected. "The Department of Justice is taking over prosecution of all involved parties." As FBI agents moved in to arrest Sheila and Rollins, Marcus turned to his mother in the gallery. Patricia Holloway's face showed a storm of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and finally understanding. "You knew," she said as he approached her. "This whole time you knew." "I'm sorry, Mama. I couldn't tell you. Your genuine fear, your real tears, they had to believe they were winning." She slapped him hard across the face. Then she pulled him into a fierce embrace. "Don't you ever do that to me again," she whispered. "I won't. I promise." Officer Mitchell, still in shock, approached slowly. "Your FBI." 3 years now, Marcus confirmed. "You did the right thing considering talking to Tanya. That took courage. But I didn't actually choke. You wanted to, that's what matters." Agent Chen, Officer Mitchell, was instrumental in exposing the conspiracy through his documented doubts about the false testimony. "I recommend leniency in exchange for his cooperation." Mitchell nodded gratefully, understanding the lifeline he'd been thrown. As Sheila was led past in handcuffs, she stopped beside Marcus. "You destroyed my life," she hissed. "No," Marcus replied calmly. "You destroyed your own life the day you decided your badge gave you the right to treat people as less than human. I just held up a mirror." Rollins was less subtle. "You think you've won. I have connections you can't imagine. This isn't over." Chen laughed. "Your connections, Judge Reynolds is being arrested as we speak. Commissioner Drake is already in custody. Your whole network is coming down, Victor. It's over." As the conspirators were led away and the courtroom slowly emptied, Tanya approached Marcus. "You used me," she said, but there was admiration in her voice. "You let me defend you without knowing the truth. You defended an innocent man, accused of crimes he didn't commit. The fact that I'm also a federal agent doesn't change that. And Tanya, you're the reason this worked. Your genuine belief in justice, your refusal to give up even when things looked hopeless, that's what made them believe they could win." "What happens now?" Now we clean house. 8 officers are being arrested today. Dozens of cases will be reviewed. Some convictions will be overturned. It'll be messy, but it's necessary." "And you?" Marcus looked at his mother, still processing everything that had happened. "I think I need to take some time off. Rebuild some trust. Being undercover, it changes you. Makes you forget who you really are sometimes." Outside the courthouse, the protesters had become celebrants. News of the FBI operation was spreading like wildfire. The narrative had shifted completely from a story about a guilty man trying to escape justice to a story about a hero who'd risked everything to expose corruption. But Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. 3 months of living a lie, of watching innocent people be victimized, of playing the victim himself, it had taken its toll. He'd won the case, exposed the conspiracy, but at what cost? As the sun set over Atlanta, Special Agent Marcus Holloway stood on the courthouse steps, watching the city he'd sworn to protect. Somewhere out there were more Sheilas, more Rollins, more networks of corruption waiting to be exposed. The work was never really done. But for today, for this moment, justice had prevailed. The trap had been sprung, the hunters had become the hunted, and the truth, complex, messy, and painful as it was, had finally come to light. The system had been tested, and despite its flaws, had ultimately worked. Not perfectly, not without casualties, but it had worked. And sometimes, in a world full of shades of gray, that had to be enough. Marcus took his mother's hand, and together they walked down the courthouse steps into the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new fights for justice. But tonight, he was just a son who'd put his mother through hell, for a greater good, hoping she could forgive him, hoping the sacrifice had been worth it. In the distance, sirens wailed, not in pursuit this time, but in victory. The blue wall had been breached, and through that gap, light was finally beginning to shine. The celebration outside the courthouse lasted well into the night, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As he sat in the FBI field office reviewing the arrest reports, Agent Chen burst through the door with a grim expression. "We have a problem," Chen said, tossing a folder onto Marcus's desk. "Rollins made bail." Marcus's blood ran cold. How the judge denied bail based on flight risk. "Different judge. Emergency hearing an hour ago. Judge Patricia Whitmore overruled the original decision, set bail at $2 million. Rollins walked out 20 minutes later." "Whitmore," Marcus muttered, recognizing the name. "She wasn't on our radar." "That's because Rollins kept her clean, saved her for emergencies like this. Marcus, there's more. 3 of our witnesses have already recanted their statements. They're saying we coerced them." The weight of the revelation settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. They'd cut off the head of the snake, but the body was still writhing, still dangerous. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you won, boy? The game's just beginning. VR. He's going to come after everyone who testified," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "Martinez, the convenience store clerk, she's in danger. Protection details are already en route," Chen assured him. "But Marcus Rollins has resources we didn't know about. Offshore accounts, connections to private military contractors. Our investigation only scratched the surface." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his apartment window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. His mother had gone to stay with his aunt in Savannah, needing distance from the chaos her son's revelation had brought. He understood her need for space, but the silence in his apartment felt oppressive. A knock at his door made him reach instinctively for his service weapon. Through the peephole, he saw Tanya Brooks standing in the hallway, looking exhausted but determined. "We need to talk," she said when he opened the door. Marcus let her in, noting how she checked over her shoulder before entering. "You shouldn't be here, Tanya. It's not safe." "Nowhere is safe right now," she replied, pulling out her laptop. "I've been digging into Rollins's history. There's something you need to see." She showed him a series of documents dating back 15 years. Police reports, court records, newspaper clippings, all pointing to a pattern that went deeper than they'd imagined. "Look at this." Tanya pointed to a grainy newspaper photo from 2010. Rollins with then-Mayor Thompson at a charity gala. Thompson's construction company got $12 million in city contracts that year. No competitive bidding. "We knew about the corruption." No, Marcus looked closer. The third man in the photo. Marcus leaned in, his breath catching. "That's Assistant Director James Crawford. My boss's boss at the Bureau." "The corruption doesn't just run through the police department," Tanya said quietly. "It goes all the way up. Crawford retired 3 years ago, but he and Rollins go way back. If Rollins knows you're FBI, if Crawford warned him. And the implications were staggering. Marcus's entire operation might have been compromised from the start. Every move he'd made, every piece of evidence he'd gathered, Rollins might have known all along. "We need to get this to someone we can trust," Marcus said, already reaching for his encrypted phone. "Who can we trust?" Tanya asked. "If this goes as high as we think." The lights went out. Marcus pushed Tanya down just as the window exploded, inward glass shards spraying across the room. The distinctive crack of rifle fire echoed from across the street. "Bathroom now," Marcus shouted, pulling Tanya along as more shots punched through the walls. The bathroom was the only room without exterior windows, their best chance for cover. Marcus's training kicked in as he called for backup while checking Tanya for injuries. "This is Agent Holloway, shots fired at my location, requesting immediate assistance," Backup is 8 minutes out, dispatch responded. 8 minutes might as well have been 8 hours. More shots riddled the apartment, methodical and precise. This wasn't random violence, it was a professional hit. They're going to breach, Marcus told Tanya, checking his weapon. When they come through that door. The shooting stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the gunfire. Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment, multiple sets moving with military precision. Then, unexpectedly, sirens, close and getting closer. The footsteps retreated rapidly. Marcus waited another full minute before carefully emerging from the bathroom. His apartment was destroyed, walls pockmarked with bullet holes, furniture reduced to splinters. But they were alive. Officer Mitchell stood in the doorway, his service weapon drawn, flanked by 2 other officers Marcus didn't recognize. I was off duty, heard the call on the scanner. Mitchell explained, his eyes scanning the devastation. Figured you might need help from someone you could trust. It was a calculated risk, trusting Mitchell, but Marcus's options were limited. As more units arrived, including FBI agents, Marcus noticed something troubling. Agent Diana Park, who should have been coordinating the response, was nowhere to be found. Chen arrived 15 minutes later, his face grave. Park's missing. Her car was found abandoned 2 miles from here. Blood on the driver's seat. The net was tightening around them. Rollins wasn't just defending himself, he was on the offensive, systematically eliminating threats. We need to move everyone to safe houses, Chen said. Your mother, the witnesses. My mother. Marcus interrupted, his blood running cold. He dialed her number. No answer. He tried his aunt's house. The phone rang endlessly. Get units to Savannah now, Marcus shouted, already moving toward the door. The drive to Savannah was the longest 2 hours of Marcus's life. Tanya insisted on coming despite Chen's protests. Mitchell followed in another car, having appointed himself as unofficial backup. They found his aunt's house surrounded by police cars, but not in the way Marcus had feared. His mother stood on the front porch, very much alive, talking to local officers. Marcus, she called out, relief flooding her face. They tried to take me, baby. But your aunt's neighbors, they saw everything. Called the police before those men could get me in the van. The attempted kidnapping had been sloppy rushed. Rollins was getting desperate, making mistakes. But desperate men were often the most dangerous. Back in Atlanta the next morning, the FBI task force convened in a secure conference room. The attempted hits had changed everything. This was no longer just about corruption, it was about survival. We have a mole, Chen stated bluntly. Someone's been feeding Rollins information. Park's disappearance, the timing of the attacks, someone on the inside is helping him. Marcus studied the faces around the table. 8 agents, all supposedly vetted, all supposedly trustworthy. But one of them was a traitor. We need to go on the offensive, suggested Agent Tom Rodriguez, a veteran with 20 years on the job. Rollins is holed up in his estate in Buckhead. We could get a warrant. Based on what? Agent Lisa Wong interrupted. Our witnesses are recanting, our evidence is being challenged. Judge Whitmore is blocking us at every turn. Then we need new evidence, Marcus said. Something Rollins doesn't know we have. That's when Reverend Clark walked into the conference room. Everyone reached for their weapons before recognizing the elderly minister. He looked haggard, aged 10 years in the past 2 days. How did you get in here? Chen demanded. I still have friends in high places, Clark said weakly. Agent Holloway, I need to confess, not just about my false testimony, but about everything. The Reverend's story unfolded like a nightmare. Rollins hadn't just paid him off, he'd been controlling him for years, using the church as a front for money laundering. Drug money, bribery funds, even human trafficking proceeds had been cleaned through the church's charity programs. I have records, Clark said, pulling out a flash drive. Everything. 20 years of transactions. Names, dates, amounts. I kept it all thinking it was my insurance policy. But I can't live with this anymore. That young man Park, they took her because she was getting close to the church connection. Marcus grabbed the flash drive, his mind racing. This was the break they needed, but it also meant Park was in immediate danger. Do you know where they'd take her? Marcus asked. Clark nodded slowly. There's a warehouse in College Park. Rollins uses it for sensitive matters. If she's still alive, she'll be there. The rescue operation had to be carefully planned. They couldn't trust normal channels the mole would alert Rollins. Instead, Marcus assembled a small team himself, Chen Mitchell, and surprisingly Tanya, who refused to be left behind despite having no law enforcement training. You're a liability, Chen told her bluntly. I'm a witness to the attempted murder of a federal agent, Tanya countered. And I'm the only one here Rollins doesn't know about. I can be your eyes on the outside. The warehouse sat in an industrial district that had seen better days, surrounded by abandoned buildings and broken streetlights. Perfect for hiding criminal activity. Marcus's team approached carefully, using thermal imaging to identify heat signatures inside. 6 hostiles, possibly 7, Chen reported. 1 stationary signature in the basement that could be Park. They moved in fast and hard, catching the guards off balance. The gunfight was brief but intense. Marcus found himself face to face with one of Rollins's corrupt cops, a detective named Ray Hutchinson. He'd once considered a friend. You sold us out, Ray, Marcus said, his weapon trained on the detective. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Hutchinson replied, his own gun steady. This goes beyond Rollins, beyond Atlanta. You're fighting forces you can't imagine. Then help me understand. Turn state's evidence. Hutchinson laughed bitterly. And end up like Park, no thanks. The standoff broke when Mitchell appeared behind Hutchinson, his weapon pressed to the corrupt detective's head. Drop it, Ray. It's over. They found Park in the basement, beaten but alive. She'd endured 12 hours. Interrogation, revealing nothing despite the torture. They wanted to know about the church files, she whispered as Marcus carried her to the ambulance. They knew Clark had turned. The mole, Marcus, it's someone close. Someone who was in that meeting. The revelation narrowed the suspect list considerably. Only 3 agents had been present when they'd discussed the church connection: Rodriguez Wong and Agent Sarah Kim, the technical specialist, who'd helped extract the dashcam footage. Back at the safe house, Marcus confronted the awful possibility that one of his closest allies was a traitor. Kim had been instrumental in the investigation. Rodriguez had been his mentor. Wong had saved his life during a previous operation. We need to set a trap, Chen suggested. Feed each of them different information, see what gets back to Rollins. But Rollins wasn't waiting. That night, the news broke Officer Sheila Brantley, out on bail, had given an exclusive interview to a conservative news network. She painted herself as a victim of the woke FBI, claimed Marcus had seduced her into a relationship, then betrayed her when she tried to end it. It was complete fiction, but it played well with certain audiences. She's trying to taint the jury pool for the federal trial, Tanya observed, watching the interview with disgust. It's more than that, Marcus realized. She's signaling to other corrupt cops. She's telling them to close ranks, that they can still win this. The next morning brought chaos. Protests erupted across the city, some supporting the police, others demanding justice. The narrative was fracturing, the truth becoming lost in the noise of competing stories. Marcus stood in front of the hotel room mirror, adjusting his tie. In an hour, he would give his own interview telling his side of the story. It went against FBI protocol, but Chen had gotten special authorization. They needed to control the narrative before Rollins destroyed any chance of conviction. "You ready for this?" Tanya asked. She'd become his unofficial advisor, her legal mind helping him navigate the media minefield. "No," Marcus admitted. "I signed up to catch criminals, not become a public figure." "Sometimes catching criminals requires becoming one," she replied. "You knew this would happen when you went undercover. The question is, are you willing to see it through?" The interview was conducted by Maria Santos, a respected journalist known for her tough but fair approach. Marcus told his story simply without embellishment. The 3 months undercover, the systematic racism, he'd witnessed the conspiracy that went deeper than anyone imagined. "Agent Holloway," Maria asked near the end, "Officer Brantley claims you manipulated her, that this was personal. How do you respond?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "I've never spoken to Officer Brantley outside of our professional interactions during the arrest and trial. Her claims are desperate attempts to avoid accountability. But this isn't about her or me. It's about the 17 innocent men she helped frame, the 3 who died in prison, the countless lives destroyed by a system that was supposed to protect them." The interview aired that evening. Within hours, it had millions of views online. Public opinion began shifting back, but Rollins had one more card to play. The next morning, Agent Tom Rodriguez was found dead in his apartment, apparent suicide, a note confessing to being Rollins's mole. It was too neat, too convenient. Marcus knew immediately it was staged. "Rodriguez was getting close to something," Chen said, reviewing the agent's recent files. "He'd been investigating Judge Whitmore's financial records without authorization." Because he didn't know who to trust, Marcus realized. He was conducting his own investigation into the mole. They found Rodriguez's real research hidden in a safety deposit box his partner knew nothing about. The veteran agent had discovered a shocking truth. The mole wasn't just one person. It was a network. FBI agents, judges, prosecutors, all connected through a private security firm called Cerberus Solutions, owned by none other than retired Assistant Director James Crawford. "Crawford's been placing his people throughout law enforcement for years," Chen said, reading through Rodriguez's notes. "Creating a shadow network answerable only to him." "And Rollins is part of it," Marcus added. "That's why he was so confident. He knew he had backup at the highest levels." The revelation changed everything. They weren't just fighting corruption in Atlanta, they were up against a national conspiracy. But it also gave them an opportunity. Crawford didn't know they'd discovered his involvement. They could use that. "We need to make Rollins think he's winning," Marcus suggested. "Let him get comfortable, maybe even cocky. When he reaches out to Crawford for help, we'll be listening." The plan required Marcus to appear defeated. He held another press conference, announcing that due to threats against his family and witnesses, he was stepping back from the public eye. The investigation would continue, but without his direct involvement. Rollins took the bait. Within hours, communications intercepted by the NSA Chen had called in every favor he had showed Rollins, reaching out to Crawford. The retired assistant director was still in the game, coordinating from his estate in Virginia. "We've got them," Chen said, reviewing the intercepts. "Crawford's arranging safe passage for Rollins to Costa Rica. Private jet, new identity, the works. Departure is tomorrow night." But Marcus knew it wouldn't be that simple. Crawford was too smart to leave loose ends. The intercepts also mentioned cleaning house, eliminating anyone who could testify against the network. "They're going to kill the witnesses," Marcus said. "All of them. Tonight." The race against time began. FBI units mobilized to protect every witness, but they were spread thin. Marcus couldn't be everywhere at once, so he made a calculated choice. He went to protect Jessica Martinez, the convenience store clerk, whose testimony had been crucial. He arrived just as two masked men were breaking into her apartment. The firefight was brief but vicious. Marcus took a bullet in the shoulder but managed to neutralize both attackers. Martinez was safe, but the night wasn't over. Reports came in rapidly, 2 witnesses dead in Decatur, another missing in Marietta. The network was executing its endgame, eliminating evidence before disappearing entirely. "We need to move on Crawford now," Marcus said, his shoulder bandaged but functional. "If he gets away, this all starts over somewhere else." Chen shook his head. "We don't have jurisdiction in Virginia, and by the time we get it, then we don't do it officially," Marcus interrupted. He looked around the room at his remaining team, Chen Mitchell, Wong, Kim, and Tanya. "Who's with me?" One by one they nodded. They'd come too far to let Crawford escape. The drive to Virginia was tense. They were operating without backup, without official sanction. If things went wrong, they'd all lose their badges, maybe their freedom. Crawford's estate was a fortress, high walls, security cameras, armed guards. But Marcus had studied the property records. There was an old service tunnel from the main house to the garage, a relic from Prohibition that Crawford probably didn't even know existed. They entered through the tunnel just after midnight. The house was quiet, most of the guards stationed on the perimeter. They found Crawford in his study, calmly destroying documents in his fireplace. "Agent Holloway," Crawford said without turning around. "I wondered when you'd arrive, though I expected you to come through the front door with a warrant." "Warrants are for people who play by the rules," Marcus replied, his weapon trained on the older man. "You lost that privilege when you betrayed your oath." Crawford turned, revealing his own weapon. "You think you understand what you've stumbled into? This network has protected America from threats you can't imagine. Sometimes preserving order requires getting your hands dirty." "That's what every corrupt cop tells himself," Marcus said. "You're not a protector. You're a parasite feeding off the system you swore to serve." Crawford smiled coldly. "Idealistic to the end. Your father would be proud." "Yes, I knew your father, Marcus. Served with him in Afghanistan before he died. He was idealistic too. It got him killed." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His father's death had been ruled a training accident, but if Crawford was involved— "You killed him," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "He discovered our operations in Kandahar, threatened to expose everything. I gave him a choice: join us or be silent. He chose neither." Crawford's weapon remained steady. "Just like you're choosing now." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Then Mitchell appeared in the doorway behind Crawford, his weapon drawn. "Drop it, Crawford. It's over." But Crawford was faster than his age suggested. He spun, firing at Mitchell while diving for cover. The study erupted in gunfire. Marcus felt another bullet tear through his leg as he returned fire. Crawford was hit multiple times but kept fighting the desperation of a cornered animal. When the smoke cleared, Crawford lay dying, blood pooling beneath him. With his last breath, he laughed. "You think you've won? I'm just one head of the Hydra. Cut me down 2 more rise. The network will survive. It always does." Marcus limped over, looking down at the man who'd killed his father. "Maybe. But today, right now, you lose. And tomorrow we'll fight whoever takes your place." Crawford's eyes went dark, taking his secrets with him. The aftermath was messier than anyone anticipated. Without Crawford's testimony, prosecuting the network became almost impossible. Rollins was captured at the private airfield, but his lawyers immediately began working on deals. Brantley recanted her recantation, claiming coercion. The legal battle would take years. But something had changed in Atlanta. The FBI investigation had shaken the police department to its core. Reform measures were implemented, oversight increased, and slowly, tentatively, trust began to rebuild. Marcus stood in the cemetery 6 months later, placing flowers on a grave marked Captain James Holloway, U.S. Army. Now he knew the truth about his father's death, even if he could never prove it in court. "You were right, Dad," he whispered. "Standing up to corruption costs everything, but not standing up costs even more." Tanya appeared beside him, having become more than just an ally in the months since the investigation. "The jury came back on Rollins," she said softly. "Guilty on all counts. Life without parole." Marcus nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly. It wasn't perfect justice. Too many conspirators had escaped, too many victims remained uncompensated. But it was something. "What's next?" Tanya asked. Marcus looked at her, then at the grave, then at the city skyline in the distance. "We keep fighting. Crawford was right about one thing: cut off one head, two more appear. So we just keep cutting." As they walked away from the cemetery, Marcus's phone buzzed. Chen was calling with a new case, another city, another network of corruption to unravel. The work never ended, but neither did the commitment to justice. The war against corruption was far from over, but one battle had been won. And sometimes in a world full of shadows, even a single victory could light the way forward. The phone call from Chen led Marcus to a windowless conference room in the federal building. 3 days later, his legs still aching from the Virginia shootout. The faces around the table were unfamiliar, except for Chen and a woman Marcus recognized from newspaper photos, Deputy Attorney General Patricia Hayes. "Agent Holloway," Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Your actions in Virginia were unauthorized, reckless, and completely outside the bounds of federal law enforcement protocol." Marcus remained silent, knowing there was more coming. "They were also necessary," she continued, surprising him. "Crawford's network runs deeper than we imagined. We've identified at least 40 agents across various agencies who were taking orders from him. The investigation you started has become a matter of national security." She slid a folder across the table. Marcus opened it to find surveillance photos of judges, prosecutors, police chiefs from cities across the country. But one photo made his blood run cold: Sheila Brantley, supposedly in federal custody, walking free in Miami. "She escaped during a prisoner transport 2 days ago," Chen explained. "The marshals guarding her were part of Crawford's network. They're all in the wind now." "She's not just running," Hayes added. "Intelligence suggests she's been activated. Crawford's death triggered contingency plans. His lieutenants are regrouping, and Brantley's become some kind of folk hero to the extremist wing of law enforcement." Marcus studied the photos more carefully. Brantley had changed her appearance, darker hair, different makeup, but the cold eyes were unmistakable. She was standing next to a man Marcus didn't recognize. Military-bearing, expensive suit. "That's Colonel David Stone, retired Marine Corps, now CEO of Blackwater Security Solutions," Hayes explained. "Crawford's replacement, we think. He's been recruiting displaced cops, former military with grievances, anyone who believes the system has betrayed them." "They're building a private army," Marcus said, the implications chilling. "And they're planning something," Chen added. "Chatter suggests a major operation. We don't know what, but the timeline points to next week." Hayes leaned forward. "Agent Holloway, I'm forming a task force to stop whatever they're planning. I want you to lead it." Marcus felt the weight of the offer. His shoulder still hurt from the first bullet, his leg from the second. His mother had begged him to take a desk job to stop putting himself in danger. But the photo of Brantley walking free made his decision. "I'll need my team," he said. "Whatever you need," Hayes agreed. Within 24 hours, Marcus had assembled his unit in a secure facility outside Atlanta. Mitchell had officially joined the FBI after testifying against his former colleagues. Wong and Kim were there, their technical expertise crucial. Tanya had taken leave from her practice to serve as legal advisor. And surprisingly, Jessica Martinez, the convenience store clerk who'd testified, had volunteered to help. "You've done enough," Marcus told her. "This isn't your fight." "They tried to kill me for telling the truth," Martinez replied, steel in her voice. "That makes it my fight." The first break came from an unexpected source. Reverend Clark, now in witness protection, remembered something from his years under Rollins's thumb. Stone had visited Atlanta several times, always around major political events. He was obsessed with something called the reset, Clark recalled during a secure video call. Said America had lost its way, that true patriots needed to take it back. Kim's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching encrypted forums and dark web chatter. Within hours, she'd found references to the reset, a coordinated attack on federal buildings in 5 major cities designed to spark a revolution against what they called the corrupt federal government. "The date," Wong said, checking his calendar. "It's the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. They're planning to commemorate it with something bigger." Marcus felt sick. Stone wasn't just planning terrorism, he was planning to inspire a wave of copycats to trigger a civil war. "We have 4 days," Marcus said. "We need to find out which cities and stop them." The investigation became a race against time. Every lead had to be pursued, every connection mapped. Martinez proved surprisingly valuable, her store's location, having made her an unwitting observer of Rollins's network for years. She recognized faces in surveillance photos, remembered conversations she'd overheard. "That one," she pointed to a photo Kim had pulled from social media. "He came in every Thursday, always paid cash, always bought the same thing, 3 burner phones." It was a small detail, but it led them to an electronics store that was functioning as a front. The raid on the store yielded encrypted communications devices, all pointing to a warehouse complex in Savannah. Marcus wanted to move immediately, but Hayes urged caution. "If we spook them, they'll accelerate the timeline or change targets. We need to know everything first." Surveillance of the warehouse revealed a disturbing level of activity. Vehicles arriving at all hours, men in tactical gear, conducting drills, crates that looked suspiciously like weapons shipments. But they needed eyes inside. "I'll go," Mitchell volunteered. "Some of these guys know me from the force. They think I got railroaded for supporting Brantley. I can sell them on being a sympathizer." It was dangerous, but Mitchell was right. He was their best option. He went in wearing a wire, every word transmitted to the team, waiting in a van 2 blocks away. The first voice Marcus heard made his pulse spike. Sheila Brantley. "Officer Mitchell," she said, suspicion clear in her tone. "Surprised to see you here." "Surprised to be here," Mitchell replied, maintaining his cover. "But after what the feds did to you, to all of us, I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore." "The feds," Brantley laughed bitterly. "Your friend Holloway cost me everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom." "He's no friend of mine," Mitchell said convincingly. "He used me, just like he used you." There was a pause, then Stone's voice came through. "Officer Mitchell, I've heard about you. You testified against your fellow officers." "Under duress," Mitchell lied smoothly. "They threatened my family. But I've seen the truth now. The system is broken. It needs to be reset." The conversation continued, Mitchell skillfully extracting information while appearing to be an eager recruit. The targets were confirmed federal buildings in Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The attacks would be simultaneous, coordinated to overwhelm response capabilities. But then Brantley said something that changed everything. "Holloway thinks he's so smart, but he has no idea what's coming. When we hit the federal building in Atlanta, his whole team will be there. We've made sure of it." Marcus and Chen exchanged glances. It was a trap within a trap. Stone knew they were investigating was counting on it. The Atlanta attack was designed specifically to kill the task force. "How did they make sure we'd be there?" Wong asked. Kim's face went pale as she checked her computer. "There's a meeting scheduled for next week. Mandatory attendance for all task force members. It was added to the system yesterday." "By who?" Marcus demanded. "Deputy Attorney General Hayes." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Hayes wasn't just part of Crawford's network, she was running it from inside the Justice Department. "We need to get Mitchell out," Marcus said, but it was too late. Through the wire they heard Brantley's voice, cold and triumphant. "There's one more thing, Mitchell. We know you're wearing a wire." The sound of a struggle, then the feed went dead. Marcus was already moving the team, rushing toward the warehouse, but Chen grabbed his arm. "It's a trap. They want us to come. They have Mitchell. And if we go in guns blazing, we all die and the reset happens anyway." Marcus knew Chen was right, but leaving Mitchell felt like betrayal. Then his phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. A video file. Mitchell was tied to a chair, bloodied but alive. Brantley stood beside him, speaking to the camera. "Hello, Marcus. Your friend has 1 hour. Come alone or he dies. And before you think about bringing backup, know that we have eyes everywhere. One suspicious vehicle, one drone, one agent who isn't you, and Mitchell's death is on your conscience." The location was attached an abandoned courthouse 20 miles outside Savannah. The symbolism wasn't lost on Marcus. Brantley wanted to hold her own trial with herself as judge, jury, and executioner. "You can't go," Tanya said. "It's suicide. If I don't, Mitchell dies. If you do, you both die and they complete their plan." Marcus looked at his team. Each face showed the same conflict: duty versus loyalty, the mission versus their friend. "There's another way," Kim said suddenly. "The meeting in Atlanta, the one Hayes scheduled. We can turn their trap against them." As Kim outlined her plan, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. It was risky, required precise timing, but it might work. While Marcus went to save Mitchell, the team would expose Hayes and prevent the reset. "You'll need proof Hayes is involved," Tanya pointed out. "Concrete evidence or she'll spin it." Martinez, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "The Reverend mentioned Hayes visited Rollins in jail yesterday. Official visit, but the cameras were turned off for maintenance. Except I know the guard on duty, he owes me a favor. His daughter works at my store." It was a thin lead, but they had to try. As the team split up, Marcus prepared for what might be his last mission. He wore body armor under his shirt, knowing it probably wouldn't matter. Brantley would go for headshots. The abandoned courthouse stood like a monument to failed justice, its windows broken, walls covered in graffiti. Marcus entered through the main door, hands visible, weapon holstered. "Up here, Marcus!" Brantley's voice echoed from the second floor. He climbed the crumbling stairs, each step measured. The courtroom was a mockery of its former self, the judge's bench collapsed, jury box filled with debris. Mitchell sat in the defendant's chair, unconscious, but breathing. Brantley stood at the prosecutor's table, a rifle trained on Marcus. "The hero arrives," she said mockingly. "Tell me, how does it feel to know you started all this? If you'd just let me arrest you that night, none of this would have happened." "You mean if I'd let you frame me for crimes I didn't commit?" "Crimes?" Brantley laughed. "You want to talk about crimes? You destroyed dozens of careers, sent good cops to prison, tore apart the thin blue line that keeps society from descending into chaos. I exposed corruption, officers who betrayed their oath, officers who understood reality." Brantley's composure cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "You think the law matters out there. You think your precious procedures and protocols mean anything when you're facing animals who'd kill you for your badge. Marcus kept his voice calm, buying time. So you became the animal instead. I became what the job required. And then you came along with your hidden cameras and your self-righteous crusade, and you destroyed it all. Behind Brantley, Marcus caught movement. Stone emerged from the shadows, weapon drawn. Enough talk, Stone said coldly. Kill them both. We have a revolution to start. But Brantley hesitated, wanted Marcus to understand, to acknowledge what he'd done. That hesitation saved his life. The wall exploded inward as an armored vehicle crashed through. FBI agents poured in from multiple entry points. Stone fired at Marcus, who dove behind the overturned judge's bench. Brantley swung her rifle toward Mitchell, but Wong's shot caught her shoulder, spinning her around. The firefight was brief but intense. Stone tried to escape through a back exit, but found Chen waiting. The colonel surrendered when he realized he was surrounded, his grand revolution reduced to a failed ambush. Brantley, wounded and on the ground, looked up at Marcus with hatred that bordered on madness. You think you've won, Hayes will bury you all. Hayes is in custody, Chen informed them, checking his phone. Martinez's contact came through. We have video of Hayes delivering Crawford's orders to Rollins. The Attorney General has her in interrogation now. The defeat in Brantley's eyes was complete. Everything she'd believed in, fought for, killed for it, was all crumbling. As paramedics treated Mitchell, who was regaining consciousness, Marcus looked around the destroyed courtroom. It felt appropriate somehow, justice being served in a place where justice had failed. The other cities, Marcus asked Chen. Raids are happening now. Synchronized arrests. The reset is over before it began. But Marcus knew better than to celebrate. Stone and Brantley were symptoms of a deeper disease, a rot in the system that wouldn't be cured by arrests alone. There would be other Crawfords, other networks, other conspiracies. Mitchell, despite his injuries, managed a weak smile. Did we win? Today we did, Marcus replied. Tomorrow's another fight. The subsequent trials made national news. Hayes received life without parole, her betrayal of office considered particularly egregious. Stone faced terrorism charges that would keep him imprisoned forever. Brantley, charged with attempted murder of federal agents, would spend her remaining years behind bars. But the real victory came in the aftermath. The exposure of Crawford's network led to the largest internal review in FBI history. New oversight measures were implemented, psychological evaluations became mandatory, and a commitment to transparency within security limits was established. Marcus testified before Congress about the investigation, his words carried live on every major network. Corruption isn't just about individual bad actors, he told the assembled representatives. It's about systems that enable those actors, cultures that protect them, and the silence of good people who see wrong but do nothing. We stopped one network, but others exist. They always will. Our job, my job, is to never stop fighting them. After the hearing, Marcus found his mother waiting outside. Patricia Holloway had aged during the investigation, worry lines etched deeper hair, more gray than black now. But her eyes held pride. Your father would be proud, she said simply. I know, Marcus replied, thinking of the man Crawford had murdered for refusing to compromise. I'm trying to honor his memory. You're doing more than that, she said. You're continuing his work. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office. The promotion had been inevitable after the success of the operation, but he'd resisted taking a desk job until Hayes's replacement, Attorney General Michael Chen, no relation to Agent Chen, had made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I want you to head a new division, the Attorney General had said, dedicated to rooting out corruption in law enforcement at every level. Federal, state, local, anywhere the badge is being dishonored. It meant less fieldwork, more administration, but also more impact. Marcus could build teams, implement strategies, create lasting change, rather than just fighting individual battles. Tanya knocked on his door, entering with a stack of files. She'd officially joined the Department of Justice, her experience during the investigation making her invaluable. "New cases," she said, setting them on his desk. "Possible corruption rings in Detroit, Phoenix, and Seattle." Marcus opened the first file, seeing patterns already mysterious: dismissals of charges, evidence disappearing, complaints being buried. The work never ended. "What do you think?" Tanya asked. "Start with Seattle. Detroit," Marcus decided. "That's where my cousin was beaten. Time to clean up that department." As Tanya left to begin preparations, Marcus stood at his window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, corrupt cops were abusing their power, thinking they were untouchable. They were wrong. His phone rang, Agent Chen calling from Atlanta. "Marcus, we have a problem. Remember the evidence from Rollins' estate? The forensic accountants found something. The money trail doesn't end with Crawford. There's another level: international connections. This might go all the way to—" The line went dead. Marcus tried calling back but got nothing. He grabbed his jacket, the administrator becoming a field agent again in an instant. Chen was in trouble. Racing through the building, Marcus assembled a quick response team. Kim tracked Chen's phone to a location near the airport. They moved fast, no time for proper authorization. They found Chen's car, abandoned doors, open, blood on the driver's seat. But also something else: Chen's phone deliberately left behind, with a voice recording still running. Marcus played it back, hearing Chen's voice strained but clear. "They came for me because I found the connection. Crawford wasn't the top. There's something called the Council International, been operating since the Cold War. They're the ones who—" The recording cut to sounds of struggle, then nothing. Marcus looked at his team, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. They'd thought they'd won, thought they'd cut out the cancer. But it went deeper, spread wider than anyone had imagined. "Sir Chohon," Kim said, her laptop showing new information. "Chen's last search before he called you. He was looking into a company called Prometheus International. Board of directors includes former intelligence officials from 12 countries. "Including," Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. "Including 3 former FBI assistant directors, 2 CIA deputy directors, and—" She paused. "Your current boss's predecessor." The implications were staggering. They weren't fighting corruption. They were fighting a shadow government, one that had been operating for decades, maybe longer. Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of his career, maybe his life. "We're going after them, all of them, however long it takes, whatever it costs." "Marcus," Tanya warned, "if this is as big as it seems, we can't trust anyone. We'll be completely alone." "No," Marcus corrected, looking at each member of his team. "We'll have each other, and we'll have the truth. Sometimes that's enough." As they prepared to leave to begin a fight that would take them far beyond anything they'd faced before, Marcus thought about his father, about Crawford's admission. His father had discovered this same truth decades ago and died for it, but he'd also planted seeds in his son and others who believed in justice. Those seeds were finally bearing fruit. The war against corruption had become something larger, a battle for the soul of law enforcement itself. And Marcus Holloway, son of a murdered hero, survivor of frame-ups and assassination attempts, was ready to lead that fight. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Washington, lightning flickering in the distance. Change was coming one way or another. The only question was who would control it, those who believed in justice or those who'd corrupted it for their own ends. Marcus knew which side he was on. He'd known since the night Sheila Brantley had tried to frame him, since before, that even since the day he'd learned what really happened to his father. Justice wasn't just his job, it was his inheritance, his purpose, his promise to every victim of corruption who'd never gotten their day in court. The Council Prometheus International. Whatever shadows lurked behind the curtain of power, they'd made a mistake. They'd created their own worst enemy, someone who understood their methods, who'd survived their attempts to destroy him, and who would never ever stop coming for them. The search for Chen consumed the next 72 hours. Marcus worked without sleep, following every lead, chasing every shadow. Kim had managed to track the van that took Chen to a private airfield, but the trail went cold after that. The aircraft had filed a flight plan to Mexico City, but Mexican authorities found no trace of it landing. "They're ghosts," Wong said, exhausted frustration evident in his voice. "Whoever took Chen, they're professionals." Marcus stared at the wall of evidence they'd assembled in a secure safe house away from FBI headquarters. Trust no one had become more than paranoia, it was survival. Photos, documents, financial records covered every surface, a sprawling web with Prometheus International at its center. "Not ghosts," Marcus corrected. "Just people with resources and practice. Chen's alive. If they wanted him dead, they'd have left his body as a warning." Tanya entered with coffee and grim news. "Attorney General Morrison wants to see you, now." The meeting felt like walking into an ambush. Morrison sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Two men Marcus didn't recognize flanked him, clean-cut dark suits, the kind of anonymous faces that populated the highest levels of intelligence work. "Agent Holloway," Morrison began, "your recent activities have raised concerns. Operating without authorization, assembling unofficial task forces, pursuing investigations outside your purview." "Agent Chen is missing, sir. A federal agent has been abducted." "Agent Chen is on administrative leave," Morrison interrupted. "He requested time off for personal matters." Marcus felt the trap closing. "That's not true, and you know it." One of the unnamed men leaned forward. "What we know, Agent Holloway, is that you're developing a concerning pattern of paranoid behavior. First, you claim a vast conspiracy in Atlanta. Then, you illegally operate in Virginia. Now you're seeing international cabals where there are none." "The evidence." "What evidence?" Morrison asked. "The rantings of corrupt cops trying to seem important. The fevered connections drawn by an agent who's been under too much stress." Marcus understood now. They weren't going to kill him, they were going to discredit him, make him seem unstable, destroy his credibility before he could expose them. "I want you to take a leave of absence," Morrison continued. "Effective immediately. Seek help, Agent Holloway. The Bureau values your service, but not at the cost of your mental health." It was checkmate, or would have been if Marcus hadn't expected it. He stood placing his badge and gun on Morrison's desk. "Of course, sir. You're right. I need help." Morrison's eyes narrowed, suspicious of the easy capitulation. But Marcus was already walking out, knowing surveillance would follow him home, monitor his communications, wait for him to make a mistake. Back at his apartment, Marcus went through the motions of a man accepting defeat. He called his mother, told her he was taking time off. He made an appointment with a bureau psychologist. He even started packing, as if preparing for a vacation. But at 3 a.m., he slipped out through a maintenance tunnel Mitchell had discovered during security sweeps. The surveillance team watching his apartment never noticed. The real investigation continued in shadows. Martinez had proven resourceful beyond expectation, using her network of store owners, delivery drivers, and service workers, invisible people who saw everything to track Prometheus's operations. "They have a building in Anacostia," she reported at their hidden meeting spot. "Officially, it's a data center, but my cousin works maintenance there. Says there are floors he's not allowed to access armed security, and sometimes he hears screaming." It was thin, but it was something. Marcus assembled his unofficial team, Mitchell, Wong, Kim, Tanya, and now Martinez, who'd insisted on being included despite the danger. "This is illegal," Tanya reminded them. "If we're caught, it's not just our careers, it's prison." "Chen's in there," Marcus said with certainty he didn't entirely feel. "And if he's not, then whoever is needs our help." The infiltration required careful planning. Kim hacked the building's systems, creating false maintenance requests that would get Martinez's cousin inside with extra helpers. Mitchell and Wong would pose as security consultants conducting a routine assessment. Marcus would enter through the loading dock during a scheduled delivery. Everything went wrong from the start. The maintenance credentials were rejected. The security assessment was canceled at the last moment. The delivery truck never arrived. It was as if Prometheus knew they were coming. "Abort," Marcus ordered through their comms, but it was too late. Armed tactical teams surrounded each entry point. Not FBI, not local police, private military contractors with no jurisdiction but plenty of firepower. "Agent Holloway," a voice came through a megaphone. "You're trespassing on private property. Leave now or we'll consider you a threat." Marcus emerged slowly, hands visible but not raised. He wasn't surrendering, just avoiding getting shot. The others followed suit, their investigation apparently ended before it began. But Kim had managed something during the chaos. While their physical infiltration failed, she'd penetrated their digital defenses, downloading fragments of encrypted data before their connection was severed. "It's not much," she said later, working to decrypt the files. "But there's something here about shipments. Regular transfers to and from a facility in West Virginia." West Virginia, where Crawford had mentioned having a training camp years ago before his rise to power. "That's where Chen is," Marcus said with sudden certainty. The drive to West Virginia felt like heading into enemy territory. The facility Kim had identified sat deep in the Appalachian Mountains, accessible only by a single winding road. Satellite imagery showed a compound that looked more military than corporate barracks, training grounds, and what appeared to be underground bunkers. "We need backup," Mitchell argued. "This is too big for just us." "From who?" Marcus countered. "Morrison's part of this. We don't know how deep the corruption goes." That's when an unexpected ally emerged. Diana Park recovered from her ordeal, but officially on medical leave had been conducting her own investigation. "I've been tracking financial transfers," she explained when she joined them at a truck stop 50 miles from the compound. "Prometheus isn't just connected to law enforcement. They're connected to judges, politicians, media figures. They're not trying to overthrow the system. They are the system." She'd brought more than information. 3 other agents accompanied her, all victims of the conspiracy. In various ways, careers derailed for asking wrong questions, partners killed in suspicious circumstances, cases buried when they led too high. "We're with you," Agent Sarah Coleman said. She'd lost her partner investigating Crawford years ago, officially ruled a suicide despite evidence suggesting otherwise. "Whatever happens, these people need to be stopped." Their small force was still vastly outnumbered, but Marcus had learned something from his undercover work. Sometimes the indirect approach worked better than frontal assault. "We don't attack the compound," he explained. "We make them bring Chen to us." The plan was audacious. Kim would hack into Prometheus's communications, sending false orders from Morrison, requiring Chen's immediate transfer to Washington for interrogation. Meanwhile, Martinez would use her connections to ensure news of Chen's arrest for corruption leaked to the media, forcing Prometheus to move him before questions were asked. "They'll have to use the main road," Wong observed, studying the map. "There's a perfect ambush point 15 miles from the compound." The trap was set. 2 teams positioned along the mountain road, waiting for the convoy they hoped would come. Hours passed, doubt creeping in with the mountain cold. Then lights appeared in the distance. Three black SUVs moving fast, exactly what they'd expected. Marcus gave the signal. Trees fell across the road, Mitchell's demolition training finally useful. The lead vehicle slammed on brakes, the others boxing themselves in. Smoke grenades obscured vision, while Marcus's team moved in. The firefight was brief, but intense. Prometheus's mercenaries were good, but they were caught off guard, expecting clear roads and no resistance. Within minutes, it was over. Marcus yanked open the middle vehicle's door, finding Chen unconscious, but alive, drugged, but breathing. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by alarm, as Chen's eyes fluttered open. "Trap," Chen whispered. "It's trap." The woods erupted with lights. Helicopters rose from behind the ridge, spotlights blazing. Vehicles poured from hidden positions. They'd been expected, planned for, played perfectly. "Well done, Agent Holloway." A familiar voice came through loudspeakers. Victor Rollins walked into the light, very much not in prison where he should be. "Did you really think we didn't know about your little resistance group?" Behind him stood others who should have been imprisoned or dead. Crawford's lieutenants, corrupt judges, even Sheila Brantley, her arm in a sling, but her smile victorious. "Impossible," Tanya breathed. "We saw the trials, the convictions. You saw theater," Rollins replied. "Staged trials, fake prisons, an elaborate show to make you think you'd won, while we consolidated power. The council protects its own." Marcus felt the weight of defeat crushing down. Everything they'd fought for, sacrificed for it, had all been meaningless. The system wasn't just corrupted. It was completely controlled. "Kill them," Rollins ordered casually. "Make it look like they attacked the convoy. Rogue agents turned terrorist, it'll play well on the evening news." But before anyone could fire, Chen managed to speak louder, his words slurred but clear. "Broadcasting. Everything." Kim's face lit up with understanding. The hack she'd planted hadn't just sent false orders, it had turned every Prometheus communication device into a live transmitter. Everything happening was being streamed directly to major news outlets, social media platforms, and most importantly, to servers controlled by journalists Chen had been secretly working with. Rollins grabbed for his phone, seeing the live broadcast notification. His face went pale as he realized millions were watching. "Shoot them!" he screamed, but his mercenaries hesitated. Killing federal agents was one thing and Shadow doing it on live television was another. That hesitation was enough. Sirens wailed in the distance, not local police but National Guard helicopters Chen had arranged before his abduction, set to respond to a specific GPS signal Kim had just activated. "It's over, Rollins," Marcus said, standing despite guns pointed at him. "The whole world is watching. The Council, Prometheus, your entire network, it's all exposed." Brantley raised her weapon, ready to shoot, regardless of consequences, but Coleman's shot took her down first. The clearing erupted into chaos. Some mercenaries fled. Others surrendered. A few tried to fight, but were quickly overwhelmed as military vehicles arrived. Rollins attempted escape, but Marcus tackled him, the two men rolling in the dirt. Rollins was stronger, but Marcus had rage-fueled determination. He thought of his father murdered for refusing to join them, of Chen tortured for getting close to the truth, of every innocent person framed, killed, or destroyed by this network. His fist connected with Rollins's jaw, dropping the older man. As National Guard soldiers secured the scene, Marcus stood over his defeated enemy. "You lose," he said simply. But Rollins laughed, blood running from his mouth. "You think this changes anything? You've exposed one tentacle of something that's existed for centuries. The Council will adapt, evolve, continue. You've won a battle, boy, not the war." Maybe he was right. As dawn broke over the West Virginia mountains, Marcus surveyed the aftermath. Dozens arrested, including some whose positions had seemed unassailable. The live broadcast had sparked nationwide outrage demands for investigation, calls for reform. Chen was airlifted to a hospital, his condition stable but critical. The drugs they'd used had done damage, though doctors were optimistic about recovery. "What now?" Mitchell asked, exhausted beyond measure. "Now we clean up," Marcus replied. "For real this time." The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity. Congressional hearings, federal investigations, a special prosecutor appointed with real authority. The Prometheus compound yielded terabytes of data, names, operations, financial records spanning decades. Marcus testified again, this time with evidence that couldn't be dismissed or buried. He showed the connections, the murders disguised as accidents, the frame-ups, the systematic corruption that had infected every level of law enforcement. "The council," he told the assembled senators, "isn't just a criminal organization. It's a parallel government operating without oversight, without accountability, pursuing its own agenda, regardless of law or morality. And it's been doing so for longer than most of us have been alive." Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Judiciary Committee, leaned forward. "Agent Holloway, if what you're saying is true, how do we know who to trust? How do we root out something so entrenched?" "We don't trust," Marcus answered. "We verify. We implement oversight that can't be corrupted by any single entity. We make transparency the default, not the exception, and we never ever stop watching the watchers." The reforms that followed were sweeping. New oversight bodies with rotating leadership, mandatory financial disclosures for all federal agents, independent review boards with civilian participation. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was progress. Morrison was arrested, his connections to Prometheus finally proven. His replacement, surprisingly, was Diana Park. Her ordeal had made her a symbol of resistance against corruption, and her appointment sent a clear message about the Bureau's new direction. "I want you as my deputy," she told Marcus at her swearing-in ceremony. He declined. "I'm not an administrator. I'm an investigator, and there's still work to do." Because Rollins had been right about one thing, the council hadn't been destroyed, only wounded. International connections remained, other nodes of corruption still operated. The war was far from over. 6 months after the West Virginia confrontation, Marcus stood in his old office, now transformed into a war room. Maps covered the walls showing suspected council operations worldwide. His team had grown former enemies like Mitchell, who'd proven themselves international allies, who'd suffered under similar networks, journalists and activists, who'd risked everything to expose truth. Tanya entered with news. London. They found evidence of council operations in the Metropolitan Police, and they're requesting assistance. Marcus nodded. The fight was going global, which meant so must they. "Tell them we're coming," he said. Chen recovered, though still bearing scars from his ordeal, looked up from his computer. "Marcus, you know this will never end right. There will always be corruption, always be those who abuse power." "I know," Marcus replied. "But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. My father knew that. He died believing that standing up to corruption mattered, even if you couldn't win completely, especially then." His phone rang, his mother calling. He'd been avoiding her, knowing she worried. Every time he took on a new case, faced new dangers. "Marcus," Patricia Holloway's voice was firm. "I saw the news about London. You're going, aren't you? Mom, don't lie to me, boy. I know who you are, what you have to do. Your father's son through and through. Just be careful. And remember, the work isn't worth anything if you lose yourself in it." After the call, Marcus looked around the room at his team, these people who'd risked everything, lost much, but still believed justice was worth fighting for. They weren't just colleagues anymore. They were family bonded by shared trauma and common purpose. "The London operation is voluntary," he announced. "This is expanding beyond anything we originally signed up for. Anyone who wants out—" "Stop," Mitchell interrupted. "We're all in. You know that." Martinez nodded. "Those pendejos tried to kill me for telling the truth. I'm not stopping now." One by one, every person in the room confirmed their commitment. The conspiracy they'd uncovered in Atlanta had become something larger, a global fight against systematic corruption that transcended borders, languages, and jurisdictions. As night fell over Washington, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a staged traffic stop to an international conspiracy, from a lone undercover agent to leader of a global anti-corruption task force. The personal had become universal. The local had become global. His computer chimed with new intelligence from Berlin, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, more evidence of council operations, more corruption to expose, more battles to fight. The work was endless, exhausting, dangerous, but it was also necessary. Marcus opened the London file, beginning to plan their next operation. Somewhere in a boardroom or bunker, the council was planning too. The war continued, move and countermove, an endless chess game with justice itself at stake. But Marcus had advantages they didn't expect. He had a team that had proven unbreakable. He had international support from those tired of corruption. Most importantly, he had truth on his side, and truth he'd learned was the most powerful weapon of all. The phone rang again, the London Metropolitan Police Commissioner requesting urgent assistance. Marcus answered, ready to take the fight wherever it led. Because Sheila Brantley had been wrong that night in Atlanta when she'd tried to frame him. She'd thought she was hunting prey. She'd thought her badge made her untouchable. She'd thought the system would protect her forever. She'd thought wrong. And every corrupt cop, every dirty judge, every member of the council still operating would learn the same lesson. Justice might be slow, might be imperfect, might sometimes seem impossible. But it was also inexorable, especially when pursued by those who refused to give up. Marcus looked at the photo on his desk, his father in uniform, proud and principled, the man who'd died rather than compromise. Next to it sat a new photo, his team after the West Virginia operation, battered but victorious, proof that standing up to corruption was possible. "I'm continuing your work, Dad," he whispered to the photo. "And I'm not alone." The London file spread before him, another chapter in an endless story. But Marcus had learned to find meaning in the struggle itself, not just its outcome. Every corrupt official exposed every innocent person, freed every small victory. They all mattered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new enemies, new battles. But tonight, surrounded by allies who'd become family working toward a goal that transcended personal interest, Marcus Holloway knew he was exactly where he needed to be. The war against corruption would never truly end. But neither would the fight for justice. And as long as people like Marcus and his team existed, the corrupt would never sleep soundly, never feel secure, never escape the consequences of their crimes. In the end, that might be victory enough. The London operation began 3 weeks later, in a fog so thick Marcus could barely see the Thames from his hotel window. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Edmund Hartley, had arranged discreet accommodations near Scotland Yard, but Marcus trusted nothing about the setup. The council had taught him that paranoia was just another word for preparation. Kim had already detected surveillance devices in their rooms, sophisticated enough that finding them was meant to send a message, "We know you're here and we're watching." Marcus left them active but fed them false information, while the real planning happened in the basement of a Pakistani restaurant owned by one of Martinez's cousins who'd immigrated years ago. "The corruption here is different," Agent Coleman explained, reviewing the files Hartley had provided. "It's not just about money or power. It's about maintaining what they call the proper order. Old families, old money, old prejudices dressed up as tradition. Chen, still moving carefully after his ordeal, but refusing to stay behind, had identified patterns in the London police's arrest records that mirrored Atlanta's. Young black men disproportionately stopped in wealthy neighborhoods, Muslims held on terror charges that never materialized, Eastern Europeans framed for crimes that benefited property developers wanting to gentrify their neighborhoods. Look at this, qui sont. Tanya pointed to a series of property transactions. Every area where these arrests spike, property values jump within 6 months. Someone's using the police to clear out undesirable residents for profit. The pattern led to a name that made Marcus's blood run cold, Sir Reginald Crawford. Not the same Crawford, but his brother, a member of Parliament, who'd been suspiciously absent from his sibling's funeral. He knew, Marcus said with certainty. He knew what his brother was doing and did nothing. Or worse, he was part of it from the beginning. Their investigation took them through London's underbelly, from the gleaming towers of Canary Wharf, where financial crimes were planned, to the council estates, where those crimes' victims lived. Mitchell had developed a rapport with local officers who'd grown frustrated with corruption they couldn't report without ending their careers. There's going to be something big soon, Constable Jamil Singh told Mitchell during a clandestine meeting in Hyde Park. They're planning what they call a cleansing. Mass arrests, deportations, making London safe for the Commonwealth Games next month. The Games would bring international attention, tourists, and money. The council's London branch wanted the city's image polished, even if it meant destroying innocent lives to achieve it. Marcus knew they had to act fast, but moving against a member of Parliament required evidence that couldn't be dismissed as foreign interference. They needed someone inside Reginald Crawford's operation, someone he'd trust. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Sheila Brantley, supposedly dead after the West Virginia confrontation, surfaced in London under a false identity. Kim's facial recognition caught her entering Crawford's constituency office. She survived, Wong said, studying the footage, and Crawford's protecting her. It was perfect. Brantley was their way in if they could find leverage against her. Martinez, proving again her worth beyond measure, remembered something from Brantley's past. She had a sister, Sarah, teacher in Manchester. They were close before Sheila went dark. The sister was the key. Sarah Brantley, now Sarah Morrison, after marriage had spent years distancing herself from her infamous sibling. When Marcus and Tanya approached her, she initially refused to help. Sheila made her choices, Sarah said, standing in her modest flat's doorway. I mourned my sister years ago when she became someone I didn't recognize. She's planning something that will hurt innocent people, Marcus pressed. You could stop it. Sarah's expression shifted. The girl I grew up with, she wanted to be a police officer to help people. She said she'd protect those who couldn't protect themselves. What happened? Tanya asked gently. The job happened. The culture. Senior officers who told her compassion was weakness, that certain people were animals who only understood force. They broke her down and rebuilt her into what they wanted. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. But maybe some part of my sister is still in there. Sarah agreed to reach out, claiming she'd had a change of heart about their estrangement. The meeting was set for a cafe in Covent Garden, public enough that Sheila might feel safe. Marcus watched from across the street as the sisters met. Even from a distance, he could see Sheila's suspicion warring with a desperate hunger for connection. The conversation lasted 2 hours, Sarah playing her part perfectly, gradually drawing out information. When Sarah left, she was shaking. She's broken, Marcus. Completely broken. She talked about the council like they're gods, like Reginald Crawford is some kind of savior. But she also asked about our mother's grave. She wants to visit it. The cemetery visit was their chance. Marcus positioned his team carefully, Kim monitoring electronic communications, Chen and Wang covering exits, Mitchell ready with a sniper rifle if things went wrong. Sarah led Sheila to a section of Highgate Cemetery, where their mother was buried. The fog that seemed perpetual in London provided perfect cover. Marcus emerged from behind a monument as Sheila knelt at the grave. "Hello, Sheila." She moved fast, but Chen was faster, his weapon already drawn. Sheila froze, calculating odds, finding them unfavorable. "You should be dead," she said to Marcus, her voice empty of emotion. "So should you. Seems we're both hard to kill." "What do you want?" "Reginald Crawford. The cleansing. Everything you know." Sheila laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think I'll betray them? They saved me. Gave me purpose when you destroyed everything I was." "Everything you were was built on hatred and lies," Marcus countered. "You were a corrupt cop who hurt innocent people." "I was a warrior in a war you're too naive to understand." Sheila's composure cracked. "You see crime statistics. I saw the reality cultures that don't assimilate people who hate our values, chaos spreading through civilized society." Sarah stepped forward. "Sheila, listen to yourself. This isn't you. This is their programming." "You don't understand," Sheila said to her sister. "You never had to make the hard choices, never had to hold the line against—" "Against what?" Marcus interrupted. "Against people trying to live their lives, against families seeking better futures." "You're not a warrior, Sheila. You're a tool being used by people who see you as expendable." Something in that word expendable triggered a reaction. Sheila's eyes flickered with doubt. Chen pressed the advantage. "Crawford didn't tell you about the exit strategy, did he? When the cleansing goes bad and someone needs to take the blame. A disgraced American cop with a history of racial violence, you're the perfect scapegoat." Marcus watched Sheila process this, saw the moment she realized it was true. The council protected its own until they became liabilities. Then they were discarded without sentiment. "Even if you're right," Sheila said slowly, "I'm dead anyway. If I betray them, they'll kill me. If I don't, you'll arrest me or they'll eventually sacrifice me." "There's a third option," Marcus offered. "Full cooperation in exchange for witness protection. New identity, new country, new start. After everything I've done—" "Justice isn't just about punishment," Tanya interjected. "It's about stopping future crimes. How many people will suffer if the cleansing happens?" Sheila looked at her sister, then at her mother's grave. Something shifted in her expression, not redemption, but perhaps exhaustion. She was tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of being a weapon in someone else's war. "Crawford's planning to arrest over 3,000 people next week," she said quietly. "Coordinated raids at dawn. Anyone with uncertain immigration status, anyone who's attended certain mosques, anyone who's protested government policies. They'll use anti-terror laws to hold them indefinitely." The scale was staggering, but the timing was perfect. The Commonwealth Games would ensure international media attention. The arrests would be portrayed as protecting visitors from terrorist threats. "We need proof," Marcus said. "Documents, recordings, something that can't be denied." Sheila reached into her jacket and everyone tensed, but she pulled out only a phone. "Everything's on here. Encrypted, but your tech specialist can probably crack it. Crawford's paranoid about paper trails but loves to send voice messages. He thinks they're harder to trace." Kim took the phone, already working on breaking its encryption. Within an hour, she'd accessed files that made even Marcus's cynical heart sink. The cleansing was just the beginning. Crawford's plan included privatizing the police force, replacing career officers with corporate security trained in population management. "It's not just London," Chen observed, reading through the documents. They're planning this for Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool. Turn Britain into a police state controlled by the council. The evidence was damning, but presenting it was another challenge. Crawford had allies in the media who'd spin any revelation as foreign interference or fake news. They needed something more immediate, more undeniable. "We let it start," Marcus proposed, earning shocked looks from his team. "You want 3,000 people arrested?" Mitchell asked incredulously. "I want them to start the operation. When the media's watching, when the world's attention is focused, we expose everything live. Show the corruption as it happens, not after when it can be denied or explained away." It was risky, potentially catastrophic if they failed. But Marcus had learned that sometimes the only way to expose darkness was to let it think it had won, then flood it with light. The night before the cleansing, Marcus's team positioned themselves strategically. Coleman had infiltrated the command center, ready to broadcast their evidence to every screen in the building. Wong and Mitchell were with sympathetic local officers who'd agreed to refuse illegal orders when the moment came. Martinez had connected with community leaders, preparing them for what was coming without revealing the source. Marcus himself went directly to Sir Edmund Hartley's home. The commissioner had been walking a tightrope, aware of corruption, but unable to act without destroying himself. Marcus offered him a choice. "Tomorrow you can be the man who stood against tyranny or the one who enabled it. History will remember either way." Hartley looked older than his 60 years, worn down by decades of compromise. "You don't understand British politics, Agent Holloway. The establishment protects itself. The establishment is about to commit crimes the world will see. Will you stand with them or with justice?" Dawn came gray and wet, typical London weather, for a day that would reshape the city's future. The raids began at exactly 6 a.m., coordinated with military precision. Armed officers swept through neighborhoods, breaking down doors, dragging people from their boughs. For 30 minutes, it proceeded as Crawford planned. Then Coleman activated their countermeasure. Every police computer screen, every television in the command center, every officer's mobile phone suddenly displayed the same thing: Crawford's voice messages, playing over footage of innocent families being arrested. His words, dripping with bigotry and contempt, contrasted starkly with images of children crying as their parents were hauled away. "The browns and blacks need to learn their place," Crawford's recorded voice said, as officers arrested a doctor who'd lived in London for 20 years. "Britain is for the British, and we decide who's British." The leak went beyond the police. Kim had ensured every major news outlet received the feed simultaneously. Within minutes, it was global news. The Commonwealth Games opening ceremony, scheduled for that evening, became secondary to images of what looked like ethnic cleansing in the host city. Crawford tried to shut it down, but Hartley had made his choice. The commissioner appeared at a hastily arranged press conference, condemning the operation and ordering all arrests stopped immediately. "What we've witnessed today is not policing," Hartley said, his voice steady despite the career suicide he was committing. "It's persecution, and it stops now." The chaos that followed was predictable. Crawford's supporters in Parliament called for Hartley's arrest. Others, seeing the political winds shifting, distanced themselves from the scandal. Protesters flooded the streets demanding Crawford's resignation and arrest. Marcus found Crawford trying to flee through a private airfield, the same one where they'd tried to spirit Chen away. The MP's arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the desperation of a cornered rat. "You've destroyed everything," Crawford snarled as Marcus arrested him. "Order, tradition, stability, all sacrificed for your American idealism." "I didn't destroy anything," Marcus replied. "I just showed everyone what you really are. The destruction is all yours." As Crawford was led away, Sheila approached Marcus. She was in custody but had been separated from the others per their agreement. "I know witness protection doesn't mean forgiveness," she said. "I'll live with what I've done forever." "Yes, you will," Marcus agreed. "But maybe living with it is the beginning of justice, not the end." Sarah hugged her sister one last time before Sheila was taken to begin her new life under a new identity. It wasn't reconciliation, too much damage had been done for that, but it was closure. The cleansing's failure triggered a cascade of revelations. Other council operations across Europe were exposed as members scrambled to save themselves by informing on others. The organization that had seemed invincible was eating itself alive. Chen received a call that night that made him whoop with joy. They found the council's main servers in Switzerland. Everything: financial records, member lists, 50 years of operations. "It's over, Marcus. It's really over." But Marcus knew better. Organizations like the council didn't truly die. They evolved, adapted, returned in new forms. Still, they dealt it a blow that would take generations to recover from, if ever. A week later, as his team prepared to return to America, Marcus stood on Westminster Bridge looking at Parliament. Reginald Crawford's office was being cleared out, his arrest making headlines worldwide. The Commonwealth Games had proceeded, but with a shadow over them that no amount of pageantry could dispel. Tanya joined him, taking his arm. Their relationship had evolved during the long fight, professional respect becoming personal affection. She was one of the few people who understood the cost of what they did. "Park wants us in Washington immediately," she said. "Something about Senate hearings on the council revelations." "More testimony," Marcus sighed. "Sometimes I think we spend more time in hearings than actually investigating." "It's important. People need to hear the truth from those who uncovered it." A group of South Asian teenagers passed them, laughing and joking, free to walk London's streets without fear of being swept up in arbitrary arrests. One of them wore a shirt that said "Justice Won" in multiple languages. "That's why we do it," Marcus said, nodding toward the kids. "So they can just be teenagers, not targets." His phone rang. Mitchell reporting that their flight was delayed due to weather, but there was something else in his voice, an excitement Marcus recognized. "What is it, Mitchell?" Kim intercepted something. Communications from Moscow. Someone calling themselves the new council is trying to reorganize. They're planning something for the World Cup. Marcus looked at Tanya, who was already pulling up flight schedules to Moscow on her phone. The work never ended. Evil never took a vacation, never stopped plotting, never gave up trying to corrupt and control. "Tell the team we're extending our trip," Marcus said. "Looks like we're going to Russia." As they walked back toward their hotel, Marcus thought about his father again. James Holloway had died believing in justice, killed for refusing to compromise with corruption. His son had taken up that fight, carried it further than James probably ever imagined possible. But the real victory wasn't in the arrests or the headlines. It was in the network of people who'd joined the fight: Mitchell, the cop, who'd found his conscience; Martinez, the civilian who'd refused to be silenced; Chen and Wong and Coleman and Park agents who'd risked everything for truth; and Tanya, brilliant and brave, who'd taught him that justice without compassion was just vengeance. Even Sheila Brantley, broken and exiled, but finally free from the hatred that had consumed her, represented a kind of victory. Not redemption, some acts couldn't be redeemed, but the possibility that even the worst people could choose to stop being weapons of oppression. The London fog was lifting as they packed their bags, revealing a city that looked the same but had fundamentally changed. The council's grip was broken, its agents exposed or in hiding. Citizens who'd lived in fear now walked freely. Police officers who'd been pressured to participate in corruption could now serve with integrity. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better, and sometimes better was all you could ask for. Kim had the Moscow intelligence ready for review on their flight. The new council was smaller, less organized, but potentially more dangerous because of its desperation. They were recruiting from criminal organizations, terrorist cells, anyone with a grudge against the established order. They're learning from the old council's mistakes, Chen observed. Less hierarchy, more cellular structure. Harder to infiltrate, harder to destroy completely. Then we adapt too, Marcus said. We've taken down one Hydra. We can take down another. Wang pulled up satellite images of Moscow, already identifying potential safe houses and meeting points. Martinez was reaching out to her network, finding Russian contacts who might help. Coleman was coordinating with Interpol, building international support. As the plane lifted off from Heathrow, Marcus looked down at London one last time. Somewhere down there, families were reuniting after narrowly avoiding separation. Officers were returning to real police work instead of persecution. The city was healing slowly but surely. You know, Tanya said, studying the Moscow files, we're probably going to be doing this for the rest of our lives. Fighting corruption, exposing conspiracies, never quite winning, but never giving up either. Marcus took her hand, feeling the calluses from years of work, the strength that had never wavered, even in their darkest moments. I can think of worse ways to spend a life, he said. Besides, we have something they'll never have. What's that? Each other, and the truth. In the end, that's always been enough. The plane banked east toward Moscow, toward new battles and new challenges. Behind them, London continued its ancient rhythm, forever changed by a small group of people who'd refused to accept corruption as inevitable. Marcus closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of rest before the next fight. His father would be proud, he thought. Not just of what they'd accomplished, but of how they'd done it with integrity, determination, and an unshakable belief that justice, however imperfect, was always worth pursuing. The war against corruption would continue tomorrow, next week, next year, but today they'd won. And in a world where victories were rare and precious, that was enough to keep fighting for.